first challenge. Can we get the electronics to work? George Raymond Babcock was born June 24th, 1936 in San Bernardino, California. And a few years later, the family moved to Glendale. He was part of a family that included himself and three brothers. His older brother was named David, and he had two younger brothers, Mike and Alan. Between the four of them, somehow or the other, they managed to keep life fairly exciting. Remember one night sitting at the beach, we were all sitting around the campfire and telling stories and this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden Dad busted loose with a couple of stories here. He says that he remembered the time when they'd taken an old blanket, rolled it up real tight, and they'd gone out and hidden behind a little bit of a hedge out there by the front lawn, waited for somebody to drive by, and then they took that blanket and threw it out as hard as they could and smacked it against the side of the guy's car. The guy slammed his brakes on, thought he'd hit somebody. Bunch of jokers. Another story he told was, and I never pictured this with my dad, but another story he told was them leaning out their bedroom window and taking their pellet gun and shooting out one of the lamp lights, street lights just down the street. I thought, oh, okay. Some of the things I've done I don't feel quite so bad about anymore. He told another story about getting up on their garage roof, and they had a bunch of big pine trees around their house, and he said they'd get out there every once in a while and practice rolling cigarettes with pine needles. He said the problem with it is that the pine needles are all in one line in a row, so he says if you light that and take a drag off of it, you get nothing but fire right down your throat. They decided maybe they wouldn't light any more holes on fire. Pretty entertaining. My dad was a parole officer, so I'm not real sure how any of them survived, to be honest about it, but he had a little bit of a temper, as I remember anyway. In high school, Dad met the love of his life, Diane. From that day on, they were almost always together. During that time, they also spent a lot of time getting to know each other's parents. At one point in the game, Diane's parents invited them to go on a trip to New York together. And so they thought that was a great idea. When they got back, they trailed around and found my dad's parents and said, how about we go on your vacation? That started kind of a tradition. Every year they got to go on 2 vacations. So I wiggled their way into that pretty easy. Shortly after high school, my dad joined the Marine Corps. He was in the active reserve for 7 years. And he and Diane spent as much time as they could together all the time. They spent every weekend together between high school and college and did all kinds of things that they could do together during the week if they could get a chance. It was no surprise to anyone in 1959 that they got married. Fortunately for them, it was in February because they decided to spend their honeymoon in Death Valley. So I'm not real sure how that was the choice of place. Never, place to choose, but there they were, right to the Death Valley. After they were married, they moved to La Cañada, California. They were close to both their families in that area and enjoyed family time with them. They also had 2 sons. That would be Garrett and Garth. So my dad, at that point, was finishing up a degree in art advertising from Woodbury College. And then he began working for the Bank of America. He continued to use his art degree, and there are several pictures, as most of you know, around our house to prove it. He enjoyed mostly seeming to paint pictures of places and buildings and that kind of thing occasionally. So, in 1966, the bank transferred George and all the rest of us to a little town called Lone Pine, California, a bit north of where we've been. This led to a few new adventures. My dad had never been a guy to be on the farm very much or deal with animals a whole lot other than dogs. But at that point in the game, he got put in as a guide, I guess they called it, or I'm trying to think of, counselor for a 4-H group. That was a group for kids that were interested in animal husbandry and a building group for them to get together and work together and do things. Dad said he was never that good or that familiar with the animals, but the parents of the kids were, and he was good at building people, as all of us know. So he worked in that capacity for the 4 years that we were there, I think. It's kind of fun because it meant that there were a lot of extra animals in our backyard. I think at one point we had a couple of goats, 2 or 3 ponies, and had a baby burro that was in the backyard. And my mom really appreciated that baby burro, especially when we brought it in the kitchen to see how things were made as far as food was cooked. She wasn't too pleased about that. He also supported my mom in organizing what they called the Jabberwock Show, which was a community variety show. And at that time also, we spent a lot of time in the weekends up in the mountains. We had a friend that ran a pack train up through the mountains up there. And we spent a lot of time helping him with equipment and moving that around. In 1970, we were transferred, or he was transferred, I guess we should say, but we followed him, of course, to Blythe, California. That's where we started our little association with swimming. Beth and I joined the swim team, and Mom and Dad got involved in supporting that and then helping with coaching, and I don't remember all what else, but we spent a lot of time at the pool together, I remember that. This is also the time that we joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In an earlier part of their life, when Mom and Dad were in high school, they babysat for a family that had 1 girl and 2 boys, and they happened to be members of the church. And at the time, my parents didn't get overly excited about looking into the church, but when the missionaries knocked on our door in Blythe, my mom decided to let them in, kind of to see, what it was all about. And shortly thereafter, we were baptized into that church and were sealed in the Arizona Mesa Temple as a family shortly thereafter. In 1972, one other funny little anecdote about it is that we lived in Lone Pine, and my dad said that's like living in heaven, and when we moved to Blythe, he said that's kind of like going to hell. I thought, well, he's not far off the mark. It's kind of a hot place to live. So he was happy in 2 years when we moved. We were transferred to a place called Apple Valley, which was a little further north. He said we were moved down to hell and we were halfway back, so we better keep repenting. But when we lived in Apple Valley, my mom got a job working for the city of Victorville. She ran the aquatics program for them. And she and George were very active in the Red Cross, teaching swimming and CPR and first aid and all kinds of crazy things that I remember we roped him into. Dad continued to work for the bank to support us, and he also supported us in all of our activities as we were growing up in the church. He supported us with scouts, which I'm sure he didn't mind doing on occasion, but sometimes I think it got old for him. And supported us in our callings. We also started the tradition of going to the beach every year down there. Every year for a couple of weeks we'd pack up and run out to the beach, and we'd pick a campground and set up camp and get in there. And I remember a few little anecdotes from those beach trips. He and Garth and I would usually get up in the morning and we'd go out. It was kind of a hike out to the beach, and we'd get out there and we'd get in the water, and I don't think we usually got out until somewhere around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. By the time we did, we were almost dark purple blue because it was so cold. But we'd get out, and my mom would come out there halfway through the day, and she'd bring a lunch with her and help us stay out there. She came out usually with us, but she'd bring the lunch. She'd come out and read a book. I'm not real sure why she read the book on the beach, but we tried to get her to come in. She wouldn't come into the water. She was smarter than that. So. And we'd get out in the evening usually and go back to camp, and we'd go jump in the shower and warm up a little bit, and then we'd come back and have dinner and sit around and spend time together in the evening telling stories. That's when my dad told me that story about those stories about being out there in Glendale and doing all those crazy things he did with his brothers. Let's see. That's about it in that area. I graduated from high school there in 1979, and then came up here to BYU. When I moved up here to be at BYU, my parents brought me up and brought my grandmother on my mom's side along, and they all decided it was time for a change. So they started looking around at houses, and I shouldn't tell this story about my dad, but it usually took him, I don't know, half an hour to even look at shoes when he went out to buy them, and I thought to myself, you'll never ever buy anything on a whim. I think they went and looked at one house up here, and they went for 20 or 30 minutes was all to look at it, and bought it. And I thought, I'm in trouble. They're pretty sure I can't make it on my own, so they're going to come check it out and see what they can do to help me. Anyways, so they moved up here, followed me up here. Since they've been up here, my dad has served in several church callings. He finished his career at the bank here, at Key Bank, so he transferred from Bank of America to Key Bank, and has been retired from Key Bank. And about the time he got ready to retire, he decided he was going to be too bored if he sat around, so he went to school to become a massage therapist, and he picked that up. And it wasn't uncommon when I'd go over to visit them, they'd have somebody upstairs on the table getting a massage. Lots of people enjoyed that talent of his, including me once or twice, so he was phenomenal at that. In the 40 years that they've lived here, my dad served in several positions in the church. He's been an executive secretary in the high priest group, leadership, and then working also as a greeter for sacrament meeting. Was involved with a lot of people in counseling and helping them. He also served as a stake auditor down here at BYU. Said, I'm so tired of doing bank work, they decided I needed more, so they put me down there. Kept him going on that. But in addition to that, he and his eternal companion, my mom, served 2 full-time missions, one in North Carolina and one in the Provo, Utah mission. He said he never got a chance to serve a mission when he was younger, and he was glad for that opportunity. And when they got back and decided to settle down and take it easy from that, they started working as temple workers up here at the Provo, Utah temple. And they were up there for just under 12 years. I remember it kind of made me a little annoyed once in a while, because every time that I wanted to go see him on a Saturday evening or afternoon, they were up there at the temple. But I do remember him saying how much he enjoyed that position and how great it was for him to work there. Throughout my dad's life, there are a few hallmarks of his personality. One of them was a belief in God, and the other was a belief in loving his fellow man. We all know how much he loved Diane. There's no doubt in our minds about that. She was the center of every conversation, decision, and action of his life. That love spilled over into their home,